And I think that's the beauty of being a leader of a team is I get the beautiful opportunity to kind of compartmentalize disappointment and move it around so it's like shared on shoulders versus it being on one person. And that is something that I have really strongly tried to do.
Welcome to Tearing Up My Heart, Emotional Leadership Lessons, the podcast where we explore the connection between emotions and leadership. In each episode, we will dive into a specific core emotion in an unrehearsed interview of selective high-level leaders. Join me, Jenna Heath, as we navigate the roller coaster of emotions that come with leadership and discover valuable insights that will empower you to become a more emotionally aware and impactful leader. From personal anecdotes to expert interviews, this podcast is your guide to mastering the delicate dance between the heart and the mind. Get ready to tear up old notions and pave the way for a new era of compassionate and effective leadership. Let the journey begin. Alrighty, everyone. Welcome back to Tearing Up My Heart. I am so excited to have my actual best friend in the studio with us today. I always get asked, people say like, wow, like you have such a large network. You must have a lot of friends. And I'm like, I know a lot of people, but today we are actually joined by my actual best friend, like matching tattoos since we were like 19 years old, walked through a lot of life together. So thanks, Bex, for being with us.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for having me.
So I'm not just excited because you're my best friend and we're going to have a great conversation, but you are a really astonishing leader in your own right. I mean, I could go over your bio, but I think I know it from heart. So obviously you currently serve as a head softball coach at a pretty prestigious D3 school down in the South. But most importantly, you were also a previous professional athlete. You played softball at the Division I level in college at multiple universities, won all sorts of cool awards when we were in college. And then you went on to get your master's of organizational leadership. So you actually have like the theory and the research behind what you do now. But something I wanted to share with our listeners that I really loved, and I've seen you like live this out on a day-to-day basis, is you said that a quote that you resonate with is "no bad hops, just slow hands," which translates across the board, regardless of the topic, to things like no bad moves, just poor planning, or no bad situations, just slow to adjust. And I feel like I have seen you make a lot of adjustments in your career and your leadership, but more than anything, I have always seen you like land on your feet. You're kind of like a cat. Like I feel like you get pushed down sometimes, but like you always land on your feet. And I think that's something that I admire in you so much as a leader, is that like no matter what it is, like you really can't get knocked down without getting back up. So I'm really excited for you to talk about disappointment today, because I think that this will resonate really deeply with so many people. And I think specifically coming from a professional athlete coaching background, like you face a lot of disappointment in your era of leadership. So I'm excited for us to be able to talk more about that. But before we dive into Q&A, can you share a little bit about your leadership journey? How did you get to where you're at? What did all that look like?
Yeah. So I think my leadership journey started the day my dad told me to pick up a softball and become a pitcher for his team, because regardless of what it looks like in any type of sports, like being a pitcher is the same thing as being a quarterback. You're kind of in charge of the field. Every time you let go of a ball, everything that results from that is because of you directly and what you've delivered. And so I think that is kind of what started my leadership journey. But beyond that, I was very, very blessed to have some amazing mentors in my life. When I was a pitcher at Texas A&M, Joe Evans was a coach for 20 something years at Texas A&M and just had a amazing foundation of what she instilled in her student athletes and what she expected them to take from her into the community. And that was a really good starting point for me on learning what leadership looks like and how it should be delivered. Moving from that, I was also very blessed to get to be a student under Kathy Van Wyk at San Diego State, who was the same. She is, to this day, one of the only pitchers in history that only has like 10 losses to her name. She is a fantastic coach as well. She's no longer coaching, but hopefully she's getting inducted into the Hall of Fame soon. But that lady kind of took me under her wing when I had made some really poor decisions at Texas A&M. Disappointment already. But coming from having so many expectations of me at Texas A&M and living up to them for 2.5 years, and then kind of not living up to them anymore and transferring from A&M to San Diego State is genuinely the catalyst that ended up defining who I am as a leader, because I had to learn that I messed up massively and that was my fault and it was nobody else's, but I could still have a different chance and a different shot. And Kathy Van White gave me that shot big time. So I would definitely not be who I am or where I am without that lady. So massive props to all the leader mentors out there. But beyond that, I also was very, very fortunate to get to go play overseas after I graduated from San Diego State. So playing for the Italian national team was such an experience in every way, shape, and form, because it's different languages, it's different cultures, it's different people coming together to try to accomplish something. And in that situation, having the leadership background that I had really afforded me so much there and just boosted my ideals as a leader and what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. It was actually in Italy that I decided I wanted to coach. And it is very hard as a player to turn down a quality dollar sign to continue pitching a softball. And I did that because I knew I needed to come home and start a career if I ever wanted to leave Italy in my future. So that was always a big piece of it as well. Because I could have stayed in Italy and played for years and years. Who knows? Maybe I'd still be there. But, and then I got back here and I got to work with you for a little while at UNLV. And it was really good. And I will say that I think the reason UNLV was great for me is because I did not have great mentorship at UNLV. And so it was really, really unique for me to go from, as a player, having that kind of support and mentorship, to being a first time assistant coach at a massive Division I university and not having mentorship or leadership or guidance, and kind of being like a fish in the water and figuring it out myself. But I think that so much added to who I am as a leader, because I got to figure it out. And as bad as that is to say, I think that was a big help for me as well. Again, at UNLV, I ended up leaving because of personal decisions that I made. And again, here we are, all is good. Like you said, I tend to land on my feet. And I think that leads into the disappointment era of our conversation, because I have disappointed myself so many times. But if you rest in that, you don't land on your feet. So I went through about 6 other states between UNLV and now, trying to find myself and find what I was doing. I coached at a D2 in Minnesota. We tried to start a small youth organization in the South. And I just ultimately realized that my why fit better into higher education because of the mentors that I'd had during my time playing in higher education. So I found the job at Rhodes College, and here we are, and struggling to build a new culture in a place that had no leadership for its culture for so long has been challenging, to say the least. But it's been a really good step and has helped me develop more of my actual coaching philosophy and leadership philosophy along the way.
Hmm. I love so much of what you shared, because I think that I'm a firm believer that like mentorship is so tied into leadership. And I think that you're completely right. I think especially young professionals, like if you do not have like a really solid mentor in your life, everything can fall apart very quickly. Like you can be the most ambitious human under the sun, but without someone to help direct you, it's like you're like a shooting star and you just don't really know where you're going. And a lot of times shooting stars explode, right? And so I think I really agree with you. And I appreciate how much you attribute your success to mentors and association of like putting yourself around high caliber people. Because I think that's something that I continue to do to this day, that I'm like, I have to be around people that are like ambitious and going somewhere and doing something with their life, because they help validate when I'm in maybe disappointing seasons that they're like, yeah, that's happened to me, or this is how I handled it, or this is how I navigated those situations. Versus if you don't have like that quality association or really good mentors to speak in your life, it's really easy to fall into a really, really dark place, especially during seasons of disappointment.
Oh, absolutely. And I think for sure mentors I've had in my life have bolstered me to be where I am and capable of what I am.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, kudos to those people. So let's start by defining disappointment today. So, disappointment refers to a feeling of sadness, dissatisfaction, or letdown resulting from unmet expectations, hopes, or desires. It often arises when something anticipated or desired does not occur as expected or desired. And I think that one of the things that really stood out to me of this is like it's unmet expectations. And I think that oftentimes as leaders and like just ambitious people in general, we put a lot of expectations on ourselves. But something that I think is fairly unique in the world of like professional sports and athletics is that you have a lot of expectations put on you by your coaches, by your team, your school, your organization, whatever it is. So, can you talk about how do you like put expectations on your, like, for example, on your team, but also like when there is disappointment, how do you help them manage those unmet expectations?
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest things I've learned as a coach versus a player is not to personalize the expectations on each individual. So it's different if, say, my starting pitcher blows it and doesn't throw well. I cannot, at the end of the game, blame her because we lost. There are 75 other factors that go into losses or disappointments or unmet expectations than one individual provides. And I think that's the beauty of being a leader of a team is I get the beautiful opportunity to kind of compartmentalize disappointment and move it around so it's like shared on shoulders versus it being on one person. And that is something that I have really strongly tried to do this year. And I think it's been so much more beneficial than simply trying to point out faults and disappointments. And because, again, like you said, there are so many expectations in sports. It's even in softball, baseball, like it's a sport of failure. Going 3 for 10 is doing well. But there are days when people go over, and that doesn't mean anything about their hard work or their dedication or their passion or their ability to execute. It just means we didn't find the right factors today that are going to help us be successful. And so, my biggest thing I've learned is not to personalize disappointment on each individual and to make sure it's more broad. And so a broad disappointment statement would look more like, as a team today, we did not perform our best. We could do XYZ better. We could do these few things better. I think our attitudes in the dugout could be better. And targeting or personalizing it to an individual just doesn't work in these situations. And I do think that can carry over to a lot of other things as well.
Yes, absolutely. I think I've learned this is one of my biggest leadership pet peeves is when people kind of create drama where it doesn't need to exist, one, but also where they they just over dramatize the problem. And they're like, well, this is everyone's fault. This is because you all sucked. This is because every single one of you did something wrong. Like, I think about this a lot when teaching, and people will be like, well, every single one of you failed the test. When in reality, not everyone failed the test. And I think then everyone gets in their own head and they're like, oh my God, wait, did I fail the test? Like, I thought I got an A. Like, my grade says I got an A. Like, what happened here? And it's like you're punishing the people who actually did well versus like I think there's a difference between that and like creating ownership as a team of being like, hey, like we could all try to do better.